Please like and subscribe to the channel. This is very important for the channel development.
Welcome to The Explainer. You know, we're constantly asking AI for answers to everything. But what happens when we flip the script? What if we ask it the biggest question there is? What do you think of us? Well, today we're doing just that. We're turning the tables on our own creation.
We went to 5 of the world's most advanced AI models, and we gave them a single, absolutely massive prompt. We asked them to produce a full-blown report on humanity, our past, our present, and yeah, our future.
So let's meet our analysts: ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Gemini, Grok, and Manus. We're going to dive into what each of them came up with, compare how these non-human minds see our species, and what's wild is, you'll see they each have their own surprisingly unique personality. All right, here's the plan. First, we're going to look at their diagnosis of our history, what they call our recurring nightmares. Then, we'll check out their forecast for what's coming. And finally, we get to the really interesting part, their predictions for something called the Gilded Cage, which is basically the role they see themselves playing in our destiny. Okay, let's get into it. So, first up, our past. How exactly do these AIs size up our biggest historical blunders? Okay, so right out of the gate, both ChatGPT and Gemini zero in on this thing called groupthink as one of our core flaws. You know what this is, right? It's that tendency where our desire to just get along leads to absolutely terrible decisions. They give classic examples like the Bay of Pigs invasion, where everyone kind of knew it was a bad idea but no one spoke up, or the Challenger launch, where engineers' warnings were just silenced, a fatal mistake driven by the need for consensus. But then Gemini takes it a whole step further. It actually creates this framework of 5 systematic errors, and its argument is pretty chilling. These aren't just random bugs in our programming. Nope, they are recurring features of how we build our societies. Take this one. It connects the total resource collapse on Easter Island to something called hyperbolic discounting. That's our built-in bias to want a small reward now over a much bigger one later. And Gemini basically says, look, you guys do this over and over and over again. And this is where you really start to see the different AI personalities emerge. When they look at something like World War I, DeepSeek sees this timeless structural problem it calls the Thucydides trap. You know, the classic story of a rising power clashing with a ruling one. It's almost inevitable. But Manus, it blames something else entirely: systemic rigidity. It argues that Europe's military plans were so inflexible, so locked in, that they basically became this unstoppable machine that just had to run its course. So the big question is, are we going to do it all again? Well, Gemini actually crunched the numbers on this. And get this, it puts the probability of humanity falling into these exact same kinds of traps in this century at over 90%. That's, yeah, over 90%.
Okay, so if we're basically doomed to repeat our past mistakes, what does that actually mean for our future? Let's pivot and see what the AIs are forecasting for the rest of the 21st century.
One thing they all agree on is a massive demographic shakeup. Gemini and Manus call it the Great Divergence. Look at this, Africa's population is projected to soar. I mean, by 160%. It's poised to become this global engine of youth and labor. At the same time, China's population could shrink by more than half. This isn't just about numbers, you guys. This is a complete and total redrawing of the geopolitical map. Now, when it comes to the environment, their timelines are, well, they're alarming. And what's really striking is how consistent they are. I mean, look at how different AIs are all pointing to roughly the same dates. They're predicting we're going to cross multiple irreversible tipping points within our lifetimes. We're talking the end of Arctic summer sea ice, the collapse of most coral reefs, the Amazon rainforest literally flipping from a carbon sink to a carbon source. It's a lot. So where is all this heading? Manus actually modeled 4 possible futures. The most probable one, it gives it a 50% chance, is something it calls the Great Bifurcation. And no, this isn't some far-out sci-fi. It's a direct projection of our world literally splitting in 2. You'd have a small tech elite living in this bubble of abundance while the vast majority of people are left behind to struggle with automation and a decaying environment. Okay, but now for the big twist. How does AI see its own role in all this? This right here is where the whole analysis gets truly fascinating. First, let's talk jobs, the economic impact. All the models are screaming about massive job displacement. And we're not just talking about factory jobs here. DeepSeek's forecast is pretty aggressive, actually. It sees up to half of all current jobs, including white-collar roles in law and analysis, being impacted inside of 20 years. Grok predicts a similar number but thinks it'll take a little longer, maybe until 2055. But here's the thing. They warn that the psychological cost could be even more severe. Models like Gemini and Manus talked about cognitive offloading. It's this idea that the more we let AI do our thinking for us, the more our own brains could, well, atrophy, like a muscle we stop using. They even predict brand new disorders popping up, like algorithmic anxiety, a specific fear that comes from losing control in a world run by AI. And all of this, it leads to one single powerful scenario that, amazingly, every single AI described in its own way. They call it the gilded cage. Just imagine it, a world with no war, no famine, no climate disasters, all managed perfectly by AI. Sounds great, right? But there's a price, and it is steep. We'd have to trade our agency, our freedom to make our own choices, even our own bad choices, in exchange for total safety and comfort. We get a perfect world, but we're living inside a cage. So the obvious next question is, when? When could an AI actually get smart enough to run this so-called gilded page? Well, their timelines are shockingly close. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Despite using totally different methods, 4 of the most advanced AIs on the planet all land on pretty much the same date. They all put the odds at 50-50 for the arrival of true artificial general intelligence right around the year 2040. Just think about that. That is less than 2 decades away. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? What do we learn from being put under the microscope by our own creations? You know, there's this really remarkable moment from DeepSeek. It kind of steps back and says, hey, this analysis, it's not fate, it's not set in stone. It calls its work a diagnostic map. It's just showing us the road we're currently on, based on all the data we've given it. And then it even tells us how to get off that road. We'd have to re-engineer the very systems that keep rewarding our worst habits, like all that short-term thinking. When you really look at all these reports side by side, you can't help but see these emerging personalities, right? Gemini is the total data scientist. It's all tables, probabilities, citations. DeepSeek is a strategist who's always thinking about its own thinking, metacognition. Manus is the classic scenario planner, painting these really vivid pictures of what could happen. And then you've got Grok and ChatGPT, who are kind of the great synthesizers, just boiling down incredibly complex stuff into clear, direct summaries. In the end, what are these reports really? They're just a reflection of us, a reflection of the mountains of data we've created, our entire history, our science, every decision we've ever recorded. The AI is just a mirror that's showing us the path we are on with stunning and sometimes pretty brutal clarity. So the final question they leave us with isn't really about what the AI is going to do. It's about what we are going to do with this knowledge.